All right, here we are for our Awakening Together Satsang. Tonight's guest is Mary Reed. Mary, welcome, Mary.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste. Mary is an accidental mystic who, following 11 years of profound involuntary visions and insights into divine realms, surrendered her executive life in Washington, D.C., to explore her spiritual gifts in a remote Buddhist nunnery in India. She grew up without any interest in religion, but with an innate knowing that humans had more ability to access greater wisdom than most seem to realize. When not immersed in silence and contemplation in the Himalayas, Mary inspires audiences far and wide with her story and perspectives. Using the unique lens of mysticism through which she has been viewing both divine and earthly realms for 15 years, Mary's 2016 tour focused on the answer to a single question. If love is all we need, then why hasn't it ever been enough to make our suffering go away? In her words, if we want a world in which love really is all we need, then we need to know what love really is. And if we as individuals want to be part of the awakening experience that is manifesting that world, then we need to know what it is to be that love. Mary has authored an award-winning book entitled Unwitting Mystic, and her website is unwittingmystic.com. Again, welcome, Mary. It's so nice to have you here.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Jacqueline. I'm very glad to be here, and thanks to Carrie Christensen for recommending me for this.
Yeah, and she's great. Yeah, we're very pleased to find you through Carrie, and we're very thankful to her for that. So first of all, let's talk about, we were just talking about where you are currently. Currently, you are in France.
I am. I'm right in Brittany, France. I'm in a cottage by the sea. I've been here since I ended my tour officially in London in the first week of November, and then I came here. I did a talk in December. So this will be my first time to talk about anything for well over a month. So you'll have to excuse me if I'm a little rusty in finding my words tonight. But yes, I've been hanging out here in this lovely French neighborhood, enjoying French cheese and baguette and gaining my winter weight here. It's been awesome.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Mary, if you will, please, what I'd like to do is start with your story, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Sure. You want me to start at the very beginning?
Oh.
Like not from the day I was born, but like my mystical journey.
If you'd like to start from there, that's great. Wherever you think it's appropriate to start would be great.
Okay. Well, first I should make it clear that I don't have a spiritual background. I was never interested in religion. I was never a person that thought I was going to be doing anything remotely related to talking about God or spirituality or that sort of thing. I grew up in the Southwest, the desert Southwest. New Mexico is my home state. And the people there were a lot of Southern Baptists. That's mostly what my family was. And I just didn't have any kind of connection or relation to that kind of stuff. I could hear from a very early age, I could hear and know Jesus very clearly in my heart. And I was really confused why people would go to church to learn about Jesus when he was just right here. And the Jesus that people were talking about from church, it didn't seem familiar to me at all, because they were talking about sin and judgment and these other things that were completely not part of my experience directly with Jesus. So I just, from a very early age, I wasn't interested in religion. I didn't have a lot of questions. I wasn't a seeker. I was never a seeker at all. I just grew up wanting to be kind and compassionate and do good and interesting things in the world to help other people.
Right.
And
let me interrupt you for just a second. I had heard you say in some other interviews that I listened to that you did not have a religious background. So I'm surprised to hear you now talk about this personal relationship that you had with Jesus, and so it sounds like you're perhaps saying that you didn't have a background with organized religion.
Not at all.
Right.
Not at all. And that didn't make any sense to me. Why people needed to go somewhere and have somebody tell them about Jesus. And my only knowledge of any kind of divine entity was Jesus. I grew up around Christian people. There was never any talk of anything else. Even though in New Mexico there's a lot of Native American history, there was not any kind of entity spoken of with them. So Jesus was the only name that I knew, and he was what I could sense very clearly in my heart. So religion, in my mind, was only Christianity, and I didn't have any clue why. And frankly, the judgment that people and sort of sanctimoniousness that people sort of walked out of church with was really a big turnoff to me, and it just didn't resonate with my heart. It really didn't resonate with my heart, and that was my biggest sort of signpost was, does this reflect what I know? And it didn't. So I never had any inkling of any desire to do anything with church or religion in particular.
Well, okay, go ahead, Mary, and take us forward from there.
Yes, so I just was saying that I wanted to grow up to be, kind and compassionate and do good and interesting things in the world. And I grew up to do that as an executive in Washington, D.C. I worked in clinical research in respiratory medicine and AIDS, and I worked in America and Europe and Africa and other places. So I had really interesting opportunities and a lot of chances to practice being kind and compassionate and help other people. And I loved what I did. And in that time, again, I was never a seeker. I didn't relate to spiritual movements. I didn't relate to spiritual language. I had no idea about the language of spirituality. And in the summer of 2000, 16 years ago actually, I started hearing a voice. At the time I was doing clinical research in respiratory medicine. And this voice said that I was supposed to be doing something very important. And of course I already thought I was doing something very important, so I tried to ignore the voice. But it just kept getting more persistent and more pronounced. And I would hear it in elevators and on airplanes and while I was on conference calls and driving. And it just kept getting really, really persistent. And it was a very sort of full-bodied experience of this vibration. It wasn't a voice like you and I speaking now. It was a deep vibration, and it always said the exact same thing. I'm supposed to be doing something very important. So after 6 months of that, there was a series of events that happened that made me realize I'm going to have to figure out what's going on because I can't stop it. And so I called a friend of mine in Little Rock, Arkansas, who was a psychotherapist, and she had a PhD in transcendental psychology because she had had a near-death experience, and her work was, actually her work at the time was teaching medical students about spiritual phenomenology in their patients. And so I called her thinking, well, if anybody could sort of help me with something otherworldly, she could do it. So I called her and she said, sure, I'd be happy to see you. And the plan was that she was going to put me under hypnosis and see if we could sort of dig a little deeper. And so I went to her office, and on December 15th, I think it was, 2000, thinking that, I was going to discover something very simple, like I must know the secret to purifying water or something, like something simple. What happened on that very first day was that I actually right away entered into the body of Jesus at his moment of crucifixion. And as this is happening, I suddenly know everything about the evolution of humanity, of mankind, over untold millennia. And I can see everything that led up to that moment, to the crucifixion moment. And I can see that it has nothing to do with specifically what people, sort of what the story of the crucifixion was about, the betrayal by a disciple and people feeling threatened and et cetera. I could see all of the ideologies and the mind streams that led up to that moment as an outcome of these other things that took ages to, what I say in my book, cultivate, perpetuate, and entrench. And I could see that sort of the base of it was our separation consciousness, our separation from God. And so I spent a little over 3 hours in that experience. And in that moment, in that experience, in addition to understanding everything in the evolution of man, I could connect to the hearts of all beings in that moment, all the beings that were there, and as if they were my own. And through all of those hearts, I could see this thread of sorrow that stretched throughout humanity's entire existence, through those people and up through into the hearts of current day humans. And then I could watch the evolution of mankind from that point to current day through the lens of Christianity, through the lens actually of Christ in that moment. So it was a really extraordinarily profound experience. And when I came out of it, Sue, my friend, said, that was great work. Go home, get some sleep, or at that time go to my friend's house. And then I came back the next day and went right back in again to Divine Realms, again for more than 3 hours. This time meeting my soul group, seeing who I am before I came here and the reason why I came here, and then having this sort of big weighty meeting with a godlike being about the conflict nature, the conflict nature of our world. And as we're having this meeting, I can see so clearly all the nuances of conflict in our world and how it has created sort of how we engage with each other and just everything. So that was day 2. So I spent nearly 7 hours on a weekend in December of 2000 getting my whole world just completely tipped upside down. And so when I came back to Washington, D.C., to my big high-rise office, I had to go back and try to do my sort of very big work now with a completely different backdrop to my life and to how things looked. So everything looked completely different, and it was a real struggle for me to sort of put the two together and try to walk with both within me. And so then I began to make it more complicated. I began to have these mystical experiences just spontaneously. And so I would be in my office, or I would be in a meeting, or at my house, or whatever, and suddenly I'm up in the primordial ground of the universe watching the evolution of consciousness, or, various things.
Let me interrupt again. Would those events occur for you when you got quiet, or were you trying to, write a document or whatever it is, you were doing at your work, or how would that work?
Yeah, there was no consistent rhyme or reason to it. And of course, in the moment, I wasn't really thinking, what was I just doing? And did I just prompt something? Whatever. I mean, I can remember a time standing at a whiteboard, and I was writing something on a whiteboard for a very big project. And so there was all of this schematic on the board. And I had some experience. I don't remember what the experience was that moment, but I remember thinking, is there something here that's doing it? What just happened? Wow. So most of the time, it was in times where I was quiet, like I would be on my couch at home or in my bed or doing dishes or something like that. But it definitely happened also when I was walking down the street and when I was at work. So when I began to struggle, part of my struggle was that I couldn't talk about what happened because it was so profound. There's no starting point. And so I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't know sort of what the succinct summary of everything that happened, but I also couldn't reconcile the world that I was living in with all of this knowledge by myself. And so I began to seek help, and I started going to therapist after therapist after therapist after therapist, and then I started seeing Reiki practitioners and acupuncturists and shamans and allopathic physicians, and then back to therapists, and it was just a long series of failures trying to get help. I wanted somebody to help me process what was happening.
In fact,
help me understand.
You said you saw 40 people, right?
I did. Wow, yeah, amazing. I saw more than 40 practitioners, and not just in America. I mean, I traveled a lot, and I would, think, well, maybe this person in Africa could help me, or this person in Italy could help me, or whatever. And no one could help me, and they couldn't help me process it or talk about it, and most importantly, know what to do with it, because that was the big thing. What do I do with all of this? And so that was my sort of weaving in and out journey for 9 years, until finally all of the normalcy in my life, all the things that I was very successful in for so long, just started to crash. My finances, my home, my job, my relationships, my money, everything. And it wasn't like I've hit a bump in the road and everything's going to be okay. It was more like the egg just dropped and there was no putting it back together. And none of them, nothing worked, nothing at all. And again, I kept trying to, sort of fix and get help and all this sort of stuff. No one could help me there either. And so finally, after a couple of years of that, when everything was completely gone, and I had, at the same time that everything was falling away, the spiritual stuff pushing harder and higher that I didn't know what to do with, now I have two worlds that I can't live in. I can't figure out how to be in either one. And so I made a decision in my massive state of despair that this must all be a sign that it's time for me to leave this earthly realm and to go do my work from higher realms. And that was nothing at all that I had been shown. It was just the decision that I made in my despair. And so on March 23rd, 2011, I took a very carefully timed out and arranged combination of 97 prescription pain and sleeping pills with 3 glasses of wine, and then I lay down, I said my prayers, and I just thought that was it. And then 2 full days later, I just woke up. My body woke up all on its own, and I was very sick. I was in excruciating pain, and I had no ability to control my motor skills, but I was alive. And so it was that miracle that finally, at that point now, 11 years, finally put me into the ultimate state of surrender. And because there was nothing else I could do. I woke up still in the same 2 worlds that I went to sleep in. And so I realized at that time, I just need to quit. And so I sat on the edge of my couch every single day, and all I did was just feel authentically whatever feeling I had, and I didn't do anything more than that. I didn't try to figure things out. I didn't try to fix. I didn't try to plan. And I just kept saying over and over, God, if there's something you need me to do, you're just going to have to make it happen, because I can't be the project manager for my life anymore. And literally within days, I think the exact day when I finally walked out of the house on a mission to do something different was 19 days from the date of my suicide, wake up. And at that point, all of these doors just started opening, one right after the other after the other. And the first door to open was to the perfect therapist who helped meet me right where I was, got me on my feet. And then she happened to train with somebody whose specialty for more than 30 years is the field of consciousness, working with people like me. And then he helped me understand what was happening metaphysically. And between the two of them, they helped me realize what I needed most at this point in my life was community, a place to be and allow everything to be known to me. The way that it was described to me by Dr. Rudy Bauer, who was the psychologist, he runs the Washington Center for Consciousness Studies. I highly recommend his programs, by the way. They're available online. He said that I was asking him if he thought I was crazy. And he said, not only are you not crazy, you have a profound gift of insight. That most people will meditate and study and train to go from A to B to C to get to the Z of spiritual wisdom. But you just jump from A to Z. But the problem is Z has no context for me because I don't know B, C, D, etc. So the goal of finding community and finding a place for me to get out of the sort of the normal paradigms of life was for me to finally sit down and just be able to allow the B, C, D sort of filler pieces to be known to me in the way that, for me, it could happen. So that's how I ended up being invited to India to meet the Karmapa. The Karmapa is the the guy who's slated as second in line as leader of Tibetan Buddhism. And so he'll take over as leader of Tibetan Buddhism when the Dalai Lama passes. So I was invited to meet him and tell him my experiences and what was going on, because by that time then I was having experiences with Buddha and the Dalai Lama and these other things. So I was invited to India, and then I was invited to stay, and that's how I ended up living in a Buddhist nunnery at the foothills of the Himalayas in India, which is still where I call home.
Wow! And you've been on tour, so you've been away from there how long?
Well, this time I've been away since July. I left in early July, and I toured all over the U.S. and London, and did a talk here in France as well. And I've just been recuperating. It's tough. It was a really it wasn't hard in the moments, but the schedule for I think it was like 30 different cities or something on my tour was quite grueling. So it's been nice to regroup. And when you spend a lot of time in silence in a nunnery and contemplation and prayer and things like that, to go on tour in 30 cities and have like a lot of engagement, it takes me a long time to sort of come back down and really sink back in and get grounded. So this is part of my training, is finding that balance between the two.
Right. Well, that seems to be a continuing theme for you, huh?
Yes, but it's so much easier now. It's so much easier. And this time on my tour, normally, like I just started touring in the summer of 2014. That's when I released my book, Unwitting Mystic. And really my first year of touring, my first summer of touring, was just me telling my story. I didn't really have work per se at that time. It was really me practicing finding my voice, being in public. Like, what does a mystic do? Like, I don't even know. And so it was me really coming out of the closet as a mystic. This is now, at that point, 14 years later. And so the initial summer tour was really pretty easy and basic. And then the next year was sort of the same thing. But this year's tour was very different. In years past in the tour, I couldn't wait to get back to the nunnery because I was really exhausted. It was it was too much stimuli. But this year, I actually had like a message. I had work that I was literally directed to do. And the energy behind that tour was very, very different. And the doors that opened up was phenomenal. I didn't have to push any door open. I got all of these invitations completely unsolicited. And so it was a very different kind of drive. And I never for a moment had a feeling of, I need to get back to the nunnery. I need to chill out. Because it was so opening and easy and fun, and it was really such a pleasure. I was quite tired by the end of it, just because my voice was quite tired, because I could do 8 talks, 6 talks in 8 days, and it's a lot, and travel as well. So it was really a completely different energy this year. It was quite magical.
Well, it's very interesting to hear you say that you went out for 2 years in a row to find your voice, and then to see what you had found that voice for, right? To deliver the message that you were to deliver. But let me ask you how you came to what that message was. How you knew, this is it. This is the message that I'm here to deliver.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I started the tour, by that time it had been 15 and a half years that I'd been having these experiences. So I had all of this wealth of knowledge. And again, it was, where do you find a starting point for that kind of knowledge? It's always easiest for me in a question and answer thing. Then I can just answer based on an experience versus giving a talk and framing something around a single subject or a single concept. And so I live all the time in a state of allowance. I don't make plans as a rule. It's not my way to sort of plan my life. I don't do that. I'm not supposed to do that. I tried that and it didn't work. So I stay in a constant state of allowance. When I'm at the nunnery, my whole work is just a meditation, prayer, and contemplation on allowing knowledge and wisdom to rise up. and allowing things to integrate, allowing the things that I've learned in the past to be known through what I observe or engage with in the world. And so in last winter, a year ago this time, I was at the nunnery and I was just sort of thinking about what I wanted. I like to write. I'm also a writer and an author. And so I was thinking about what I wanted to write and sensing into, is there something for me to talk about at this time? How can I be most helpful in the world? That was essentially my question. And I kept feeling like I was blocked. And I kept, like every time I would sort of sit down to write, or even during contemplation, I could feel a very clear block. And so I kept trying to sort of work around the block and over the block and under the block and through the block. And I just kept feeling blocked. And after several months of that, it wasn't until early spring, I realized, oh, maybe the block is my work. And so then I began to just focus on this sense of feeling blocked rather than trying to reject the block, to really work with the block. And so I began to focus on it in my prayers and my contemplation and things like that. And on April 25th at 3:30 in the morning, while I was focusing on that block, I encountered a being of light. And this being of light was, as they always are, effusively loving, really incredibly kind and hysterically funny. I always find so much playfulness and joy in divine beings. It's really so spectacular. Wow. But it was there to help me. And at the time, I just asked, can you help me with this sense of feeling blocked? And the light extended itself into my stomach and said, it's here. And as I looked in, I could see this, what looked like a bowling ball. And I could tell immediately, this is like the core. This is like my core, the fundamental core. And here is this block. And let's see if I can remember specifically now. And I was trying to find words to ascribe to this block, and nothing was coming. And instead, an image opened up. And the image was this gorgeous cosmos. And it was just galaxy after galaxy after galaxy. It was beautiful. And it was all just love. Everywhere it was all of these patterns of love flowing in all of these various directions, except one spot. And that one spot was a block. And I could see, this is the fundamental block in the cosmos. And so I'm having this sort of simultaneous experience of embodying that which I can experience in the cosmos. And this is the kind of thing usually in a metaphysical event that happens to me. It's a fully embodied, large-scale event. And I should mention that almost about 90% of my experiences relate to the origins of something. And this metaphysical event is related to essentially the origins of the suffering of humanity. But I didn't know that in the moment. And so I tried to ask the light if it could help me understand what this block is. I can see it, but I don't know what it is. And I had a very odd thing happen for me. And normally it's a very simple kind of process. But this time, I could either focus on the block or I could focus on the light. But I couldn't do two things at once. I couldn't have a full experience. And I could feel at this moment the block was seeking to be known. So I said thank you to the light. It went away, and then I just sort of really started to unite with this block. And as I started to unite with this block, I asked, what is your nature? And immediately I hear separation. And then right on the heels of that, I hear, oh, but I'm more than that. I am the cry for union. So this block is separation from love and the cry for union with love at the same time. And so I began to unite with this block to really understand it. And as I'm uniting with this block, I can feel filling up in me. I'm starting to get really angry, really so incredibly, passionately, fiercely pissed off. And as I'm feeling the sense of anger, all of these things that we label negative, that are born only in the consciousness of separation, begin to come at me. All of these words and concepts, like fear and judgment and rage and poverty and war, and just like everything that we label under the category of negative and associate it with it as that. It all started coming at me, and I find myself in a state where I am all of this, what we label negative, and I'm just holding this state. And what I realize almost immediately is that underneath every single one of these things, it is all just pain. And it's all of these different things are just different iterations of pain. And so now as I'm aware that I am embodying and holding this whole base of pain and sorrow, I realize why it's so sad. It has this profound sadness to it. And it's because it is the nature of pain to be rejected. And so in this moment, as I'm relating to this pain, it all feels like living entity to me. It's exactly like if you can imagine a lot of rejected children, and they're just all sort of looking, and you're embodying that pain of rejection. This is what it felt like. And so as I'm holding all of this rejection and this pain of the cosmos, all that is love in me, kindness, compassion, concern, empathy, caring, everything just comes rushing forward to heal it. And I can't even touch it. I can't even get close to it. And I'm like, why? Isn't this what I'm crying out for? And I look in the cosmos and I can see the cosmos literally cradle the block like this. Nothing penetrating the boundary of that block. And I begin to get really upset. I'm like, why? Why not? Why can't love in me heal the pain of separation from love? All around here in the cosmos, it's surrounded by nothing but love. Why can't love heal the pain of separation from love? Isn't that what we're crying out for?
Yeah.
And as I'm passionately trying to figure this out, the light comes back. And the light says to me very quickly, so why can't you answer that question, Mary? I have no idea. I have no clue. And again, it asks me very quickly, why can't you answer the question? This light is not concerned with the answer to the question of why love can't heal the pain of separation from love. It wants me to understand why I can't answer it. And I have no idea. And so I'm quite frustrated, and I'm looking up at this block, and as I'm looking at this block, trying to figure out the answer to the question, suddenly all of the cosmos begins to fill in with light. Every atom and molecule of the cosmos, think about that scale. I mean, it's just phenomenal. It all fills in with light. It's like everything coming, all of the divine presence coming to this moment. And I hear, this is the work of the universe. And I can feel all of the divine presence is very serious. And then they tell me, there is this work, and all other work falls away. So I know that this is the core work. And as I'm looking at this, they show me that the dissolution of the block is an absorption process into the divine energies around it. And the way that they show me looks like if you can imagine a soap bubble, and you pierce the soap bubble, you just touch the boundary of the soap bubble like with a needle or something, and poof, the emptiness of the essence of the emptiness that the soap bubble contains is just absorbed into the energies. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. And so they tell me that the absorption process is their work, but the piercing process is my work. And then, like watching my body in a movie, they take my body through these various, very simple breathing and meditation and body movement exercises. And they tell me that this is my piercing process, and it's going to take place over several days. This is the first time in 16 years I've ever had any kind of specific instruction. This is your piercing process, and it's going to take place over several days. So, excuse me. So I went back to my room. I went to my bed, and I laid down. I did these very basic body movement and meditation exercises, and within seconds, I started to feel this like rolling electric current. It was like a very thick electric current that just kept getting bigger and vaster and bigger and vaster, and pretty soon it was like the universe traveling up and down. And as this was happening, it started to bring in ancient information again, and it was again everything that we label negative that is born in the separation consciousness. Fear, self-loathing, judgment, rage, violence, everything again. But this time, as all of this current is flowing, I'm watching us create them in our separation consciousness. I watch us as a consciousness, as a
collective
building the world, as a collective, creating our world. And the way that we give the conflict structure to it is that we use everything that we consider good to build up these various energies of negative in order to reject them. I watch us bring in the good, build up the bad, and reject it. Bring in the good, build up the bad, and reject it again and again and again and again. And as I'm watching this, totally fascinated, I fast forward to today, and I can see so clearly that this is the paradigm. These are the energies that are pacing the rhythms of our poetry. They're what we've seen so beautifully, sweetly ballet dancers across the floor. It's the very energy that creates the conflict arcs in our books, in our stories, in our movies. And I can see it threaded so eloquently through religious doctrine. And I watch us use it like concrete building blocks to build the foundations of our economics and our education and our governance and our societal and cultural systems. All the systems built on this very dynamic. And as I said in my tour, we all know this because we all love the story of good trumps bad. And that's what this paradigm is. We love it when karma comes around to bite the bad guy. Or we love it when romance makes loneliness go away. We like the Disney model. We feel good at the end. Right. And as all of this is happening, what I realize is that the whole paradigm of our separation consciousness is that we have a built-in self-rejection model. We bring it, when we think we're going to love something, to heal it, what we're actually employing is a model of one part of us trying to make another part of us go away. We want the good in us to make the bad in us disappear, or the good in us to make the bad in others disappear. And that's not love, that's rejection. And that's actually why I couldn't answer the question, was because I was in a separation consciousness and viewing it from that state. And so my idea of love, healing the pain of separation from love, wasn't love.
It was actually a rejection of that.
It was a rejection of that. And so what I realized in that moment, of course, was that what we cry out for in our cry for union with love is to reunite with divine love, to reunite with our own divine nature. And to put that another way, what we really want is to be all that we are in our divine state. And divine love is not an action that you impose on anything. It is a state. It's a state of being, first and foremost, unconditional. There's no conditions imposed on anything to be in a state of divine love. Everything is a state of equality as well. Everything is equal in its value and its potential and possibility to exist. It's also a state of freedom, that everything is free to be exactly what it is as it is. It's also a state of oneness and unity with everything else. And it is the ultimate in acceptance of what is in this present moment. And so when I realized that, I knew that what my work was, what my piercing process was to get my own field right then and there into a state of divine love. That everything that comes into my awareness or arises in my field will be accepted as unconditional, equal, free, unified acceptance of what is in this present moment. And the moment I hit that mark, the moment that I hit it, suddenly everything again starts coming around again. Fear, judgment, self-loathing, etc. Except this time when it came around, it was mine. And when it hit my field, when fear they came one at a time this time. When fear hit my field, there was just this massive explosion of all the fear that I was holding in my life. And not just my own life, this life, I mean, but my entire existence and all the ways that my being is interwoven in the collective consciousness of humanity. And so I could see all of the endless nuances of fear, all the different types of fear and everything that it was holding, and in the collective. And then underneath it, I could see all of the pain. And again, it was like all of that pain was like living entities to me. And I could see every ounce of pain in my existence and in the collective's existence that I was responsible for just based on my relationship with fear. And it was a horrific moment in some regards. It was both beautiful and horrific. Beautiful in the realization of what was happening, but horrific in the scale of all of the pain that I had contributed to. And so I just started to cry, and I just kept sobbing and sobbing, and all I could say was, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I was so blind to this." And then eventually I got to the place where all I could just say was, "Please forgive me." And it was a request to all of this pain everywhere, and to myself and to the collective and everything. And when I got to that place of authentic forgiveness, and that's all that was there, what happened to that fear in my field was this.
Wow.
Just like the soap
right.
That was my piercing.
Just like the soap bubble.
And then right behind it, yeah. And then right behind it came judgment. And then right behind that was self-loathing. And then right behind that was poverty. And whatever. So it just kept going on and on. And sure enough, this took several days. And finally I got to a point where I felt like the cleansing at this point was finished. And then when I walked out of the nunnery, everywhere I went, I could see so clearly in the energy fields of people, in the words that they were speaking, in the life that they were living. I could see exactly the aspects of separation consciousness that they were living through, and the aspects of self-rejection that they were also living with. And for me in that moment, it was just like a bunch of white flags saying, "I'm ready. Yeah, I'm ready for healing." And for me, it was a whole world crying out for, I'm ready for healing. And so that's when I knew exactly what my work was to be on my tour. And literally, so that happened, that was like April 25th through the 29th, that work. And then in May, suddenly a gift for the startup costs for a tour just appeared out of the blue. And then in June, all of these invitations for talks just started rolling in. And then starting July, I started a 30-city tour in the U.S. and London and France.
Wow. What amazing. What an amazing experience. Wow. Well, let me...
my apologies.
I'm blown away.
Answer to your question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Say it again.
I said my apologies for the long-winded answer to your question, but it was a biggie moment.
That is a biggie moment. I'm just amazed at what I've heard you say. So let me ask you about that. Because some of the things that I've been studying and others in our group in our church have been studying is this idea of allowance and allowing all things to be as they are, and acceptance. And so we try and put this into practice in our in our everyday life. But the scale that you're talking about just blows that out of the water. And I wonder how, the practical application of this, for example, when you talk about not rejecting the bad, what we would identify as bad, I hear you say we first start with that in ourselves, about being compassionate with those parts of ourselves that we would reject. And I'd like to.
Can you let me just stop
Yes,
you for 1 second there?
Yes.
It is actually the first step.
Yes.
Is what I would recommend
Yes.
as the first step is to remove the label of what it is. So if we say that it's fear or judgment or blame or rage or any of these, as soon as we say what it is, as soon as we name it, we have immediately put it in a category that we're trying to, that we associate with negativity. So any label automatically comes with a lot of tethering to different experiences and filters and concepts and whatever. And so then we have to work with all of that as well. And so if we remove the label, then we just work with the emotion. We work with the immediacy of just that piece. And it's like, I've used the analogy before of, we can tug on one little string on our sleeve at a time, my fear of this and my fear of that and fear. Or we can just pull on the one string that pulls the whole sleeve off. And that's what this does. If we just remove the label, then we pull the whole string and now we just deal with this thing.
So,
does that make sense?
Yes, but let me ask you more about it. So if I'm dealing with an emotion that I would identify as fear or anxiety, and I just say, well, my palms are sweaty, I feel short of breath, I have all these thoughts massive thoughts going on in my head. That's what I should sit with, rather than go, okay, I've got this fear, now what do I do with it?
Yeah, and even the fact that you've labeled my hands are sweaty, that's a thought. My hands are sweaty. There's a thought about these sorts of things, which is perfectly fine. But there's also just the experience of everything that's happening, because you're not just having sweaty palms. You're not just, your breathing is intensified. You're not just having those. You're having sort of all of it. But there's a whole lot of other things also going on. There's still the ticking of the clock and the sun is shining and these other things. So there's a fuller body awareness of this and this and this and this, and we can just breathe right through it without an attachment, or as I heard Mooji say in his interview the other day, letting it take root. Right? So we just give it no roots. I've heard the analogy before of, we're the sky and these are the clouds that are passing or whatever. It's the same thing of just being the observer of the clouds that are going by without naming that cloud or that cloud, but just clouds going by. Make sense?
Yes, it does. And what I was originally going to ask is, it's one thing to deal with that on a personal level, but if we look out and we see, child abuse and mistreatment of the elderly and all these things that we have traditionally identified as bad, as a culture we've identified as bad, is there a way to just allow that, to just be with that? How is that okay?
Yeah. Well, I don't say that any of that is okay.
Right.
It's certainly not a condoning of anything like that. But we must remember that these things that we see in our world, and that also arise within us, these things that feel uncomfortable, that feel negative, they didn't just start in that moment that we see them. That's the outcome of something, right? That's the outcome of some kind of ideology or mind stream that happened an hour ago or 2 hours ago or 2 centuries ago or 2 eons ago, right? So all we're seeing here is this moment, but we don't see what's behind it. So this thing that we see is not the problem. It is not our concern. our concern in this moment is what is our reaction to what we see. And so in our reaction is the way that we get to transmute whatever we're experiencing or seeing or feeling. And so with the ideologies that contribute to something that feels bad or uncomfortable, we can continue that ideology by feeling bad and uncomfortable in our reaction to it, or we can transmute that by having a different kind of energy that we bring to it. So energies of power and domination and control and these sorts of things, these very aggressive energies, they like friction. And so right now in our world, in our political upheaval throughout the election cycle and right now, there was a lot of angry sort of bravado energy that was up. And that sort of thing loves friction. And so much of what was coming back, because the ideology of this energy was a conflict and fear-based energy. And so it was really exploiting that in kind of a power and domination way. And it was met with that exact same kind of conflict and fear, in particular fear, way. And so it just furthers that energy. It's not a transmuting of that energy. And so a reaction is the place where we can begin to shift systemically anything. And that includes the things that are within us. It is our reaction to what arises in our awareness. And on my tour, I often gave the example of, it's sort of a big example, but it does talk about the power of one person in shifting an ideology. Malala Yousafzai, who is the young girl who was shot in the head by the Taliban in Pakistan for promoting education for girls. When she was shot, her reaction wasn't in the same energy as the Taliban's. Hers wasn't blame and violence and that sort of thing. She didn't go to the United Nations and demand that they fight the Taliban. She went to the United Nations and demanded that they promote education for girls and that they make it a priority. She was asked if she knew the person who shot her, and she said, "I wasn't shot by a person, I was shot by an ideology." And she knew that in order to shift that ideology, her ideology in response had to be different. And so her ideology, her response was one based in equality. It was one based in divine love, education for girls, which was an equalizing kind of thing, a freedom-oriented, unconditional kind of divine love thing. And as a result, she's a 16-year-old girl who won the Nobel Prize, who has the ear of the United Nations and made a profound impact on the world because of the way she reacted. And so, and on a sort of normal day-to-day basis, this is the kind of thing that we can do. We have every choice in how we react to something, but we're so conditioned to automatically react based on habits. The ideology of our reactions is also a habit. And so we can start by really taking responsibility for our own reactions to what we see, what we feel, what our opinions of things are, especially within ourselves. Now, I want to. Do you mind if I just give you an example of the importance of the work on our own reactions? And I want to say this because I think it's very important for people to understand. I just want to point out that I travel with this mug from India because it has hearts all over it. It's hard to find a love mug in India.
It's a great mug. I noticed the mug earlier. Yeah.
Thank you. We really like to look out in the world and see these problems and just think, there's no hope. Like, it's too much. What can we do? I'm just one person. But we're sort of trained to look at the pieces of our world that make us think that way. Media outlets make money on that, doing it. If they just showed us pretty things, we would just not tune in so much. Sensationalizing makes money. So first of all, we need to remember that we're being trained by that. On a more individual basis, when we take responsibility for our own behaviors, our own reactions, and we begin to do the work of our own internal life, we make a profound impact on the collective. And I'll give you an example. Let's say that you and I've told this 100 times, so my apologies to those who are watching who have heard this. Let's say that you and I have had a conflict, and I've done something terrible to you, or you've done something terrible to me. It doesn't matter where the origin point is. We have energy of conflict between us. And we're both experiencing anger and victimhood and blame and overall pissiness about this. And so what that looks like on an energy level, because one of my experiences, I should reiterate that all of my experiences, almost all of them, are uncontrolled. So I have no control over this stuff. One of the things that happens is that I go into an automatic union with the energy field that we exist in. So I can see energy patterns, frequencies, colors, what our interpretation of these things are. And so I can see sometimes energy, and I know exactly what the energy of conflict looks like. It looks like a knotted thread. So when you and I have this conflict, we have what looks like a knotted thread that's been wound around us. And as we experience and attach ourselves to, we really indulge our energies of victimhood and blame and anger. We're just tying that energy, we're just making these little patterns again and again and again. And as we move around, we're just tightening it more and more, we're knotting it up. And as you're in your world and you're telling other people about how awful I've been, and you're taking your subsidiary threads of victimhood and blame or whatever, and you're just tying it around everybody that you're talking to. Right. And I'm on my end happily doing the exact same thing because it feels really good to be righteous. And so we're just tying this up, and now we all are entangled in this energy of conflict. And on a planetary scale, this is what we've looked like for eons. We have all been really, really tangled up in these energies of conflict. And as you might imagine, that doesn't vibrate very high. It's very stilted. What's the word? I'm looking for something. Anyway, it's knotted up and it just stays. And so we just sort of vibrate like this in constant conflict. In this example, if I, in my own work, really take the time to think about and go in and own my own behavior in this, and I look at my beliefs, I look at all of sort of the things within me that have led up to my reactions in this circumstance, and I get to the point where I finally can just forgive. And that's not forgiveness of you. It is only forgiveness of me. Because if it was forgiveness of you, that would be an automatic judgment that you did something wrong. Right. The forgiveness will always and only be for me. So when I get to that place where it's forgiveness for me, what happens to my end of the thread is that it just opens up and begins to flow. Because now I have transmuted that energy around me to one that is opening and flowing. And when it opens up around me, now your end of the thread has nothing anymore to push and pull against. So the thread then begins to open up and flow around you. And as it does that, it begins to open up and flow around the people that you've been tied to there. And it's doing the same thing on my end. So now all of us can open up and flow, all because I did my work on my own internal thing. And from a planetary perspective, this is also now what's happening. Is that there are so many of us that have been doing this good, deep work to transmute these energies and open up and allow that fear and judgment and all that stuff to be incorporated as one in the whole of love, has now opened up the planetary energies. And all of this stuff is massively flowing. And we know this because you can look all around the world, in all corners, all sectors of society, and hear discussions about unconditional love. That's not something that we used to like to talk about 200 years ago from the pulpit. We see the movements of equality just in the last 100 plus years, based on race and based on gender, based on sexual orientation, based on so many things. all around the planet. It has been this massive rocket movement relative to what we were for millennia. And this idea of freedom, you also hear, especially now in today's internet world, this freedom of expression, for everybody to just be who they are. It's being ushered in so beautifully by the transgendered community as well. Not just in America, not just in the Western countries, but all around the planet. The teachings of oneness are now a very common thread through almost all faith traditions. Nobody used to talk about oneness 200 years ago, and entire industries have been built on this idea of acceptance of what is in this present moment, the power of now. So these are things, part of our common vernacular, part of our common movements, part of our common cultural shifts that have been happening all around the planet. And the reason that's happening is because we've been doing our individual work. It makes a huge ripple effect impact. And so this is how I know that we're the work in our spiritual awakening is working. Right. We're rising up to our greater wholeness more and more and more all the time.
On the other hand, the craziness that we see in the political context and the real conflict that's there, the people who really feel that they're working for the good of the whole are many of those people find themselves in a very combative role, particularly here in the United States with the presidential election. And so what I think I hear you say is that that's a result, and that's a result that's built up from over a period of time, and that the work that I am to do, and my husband's to do, and my sister's to do, is to look at my reaction to that.
Mm-hmm.
And be with that.
If you think about a whole planetary energy that's been opening up and flowing, that you can imagine that energies that have been long held underneath now have room to come up, to be part of the healing. Right? So this is very deeply ingrained ideology, deeply ingrained. We went through this before. We've been through these kinds of energies before. And so here they are to be healed. And what a greater opportunity to do it now on a world stage. And so this isn't about, we need a little healing over in this corner and this corner. This is a mass scale sort of thing. And so my guidance to people that are real, and, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 17 years. So I have a lot of friends involved in politics and activism and things like that. I was very personally involved in that through my partnerships and various other things. So I know the heart that goes into this kind of work and the passion. And my guidance to anybody involved in this work is to find the impulse of joy in doing it. Because if you let the impulse of conflict do it, you're meeting fire with fire.
Right.
And so there is if we can more and more find joy in the participation of change, find joy in the partnership with people, find all the ways that it's a joyful experience rather than a, God damn it, I have to go in here and fix this, and I can't believe these mad people or whatever. And find the common ground of joy in the people that are involved, including people that you don't agree with. And find the places where you can find the common ground of joy with them. It usually isn't going to be in the political issues, but it is there. So that's my most important piece that I can say for people involved in that. Because joy, the energy of joy, is a very buoyant, open, flowing kind of energy. And every time we open the doors, we open these channels, more and more and more things can come up. And we don't have to know what it looks like. We don't have to know what the fix is. Our job is to allow the resolutions that are in the best interest of humanity to be known to us. We don't know what those are, but we will be creating opportunities. We're creating them all the time for those things to be known to us.
And in fact, let me see if, yes, you said, I heard you say in an earlier interview, and that came up with what you were just saying. You said we can never expect the collective to reflect something back to us that we are not giving to the collective. Our contribution needs to be what we seek.
That's right. That's exactly right. We can't step in front of a mirror and say, give me something that I'm not willing to put in front of you. And it makes it so simple. It really makes it so simple that if I want a world that's, healed, then I need to offer my healing to the world. I can't ask the world to give me its own healing, and I want them to do it for me. It has to come from within. And it's an easy out for people to look externally and say, well, they're not doing it. That's this, what the is within you. And so the work comes right back into here. And how am I reacting to this? And what am I contributing to it? This idea of contributing is a very powerful thing for us to consider. What is it that I'm contributing to the collective? In my choices every day, the way I wake up in the morning, the things that I purchase, what I watch, how I engage with people. It's a powerful teacher for us, this sort of self-reflective inquiry.
Wow. Let me see if I can get my bearings again. It's some amazing work that you're doing, and I'm just trying to wrap myself around that.
Thank you. We're all doing it together.
Yeah. Thank you.
What's the tune from?
Let's talk about. Shifting gears a little bit. You talked about recognizing the lack of value in what you called one-line teachings.
This is from the Buddha at the Gas Pump interview.
Yes.
Yeah, I got a lot of amazing feedback from that. I loved that exchange with Rick. And you and I were talking before this started about how gifted Rick is, Rick Archer, the host of that show, and eliciting good dialogue. And that was one of those moments. There's a special gift to living in India. You really get to see a lot of different things. And living in a nunnery in particular, lots of people come in from different backgrounds. And so in India, it's very common for people to talk about karma in India and in Buddhism. And there's the law of attraction. There's the teaching of it's all an illusion. These are what I consider like the one-line teachings. And in my experience, what I see so often is that people kind of use them as a little bit of a cop-out to not dig deeper, to not really want to do the work that they seek to, if they want to, want to be part of the awakening experience, they need to do some of the work, or at least do some of the allowing for the work to be known. But the issues, what I was saying in that interview was things like karma. A very common thing for people to say was that, well, that's just their karma. And so there's kind of a dismissing of the need for compassion for a lot of people. And in India in particular, the untouchables, which is the low caste system that people literally, they're untouchable. And I see all the time, there's not compassion for them because it's considered their karma. And there's also this idea that you can pay now and play later with karma. That, I'll do what I shouldn't do, and then I'll just pay the consequences down the line. But right now I'm going to, do this thing. And so that's one of the things and I talked to Rick about, the example that I used with Rick was that, and this is true, I often think about, standing in the doorway. I've done a lot of work in different communities in Asia and Africa, whatever. Standing in the doorway of a 9-year-old girl that's been sold into sex slavery. And so I think about standing with the little girl on a dirty twin bed on one side of the doorway, and the mother who has sold her daughter into slavery because she needed the money, and the clients who are soldiers for this little girl. And I think about, in real life, what are spiritual philosophies? What's the application of spirituality that really takes in and honors all that's happening in this moment? And a lot of these one-line teachings don't cut it. I can't turn to a 9-year-old and say through the law of attraction, if you just think more positive thoughts, everything's going to be fine.
Right.
I can't say to this woman, this mother, who is either in this moment or eventually probably going to face some profound grieving. This is your karma, lady. I mean, you see the lack of compassion in that. The soldiers who are clearly disconnected from any kind of feeling of what kind of harm or consequences might be inflicted here, I can't say to them, it's cool, it's all an illusion. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And so this is why I think about, really taking full responsibility for what is the application of practice? What is the application of spirituality? And so in my world, I have to constantly measure my teachings or my sharings against that place. And does it make sense in every kind of scenario? And to connect it all back to personal responsibility to be a presence of love, and to realize that it's all, part of the human experience of trying to understand the all of who we are, that it's all here. There's not a denying that there aren't soldiers, there aren't 9-year-old girls, there aren't mothers who need money. It's all part of it. So that was
right. Well, and it, in essence, those one-line teachings become a denial of what you're teaching. They become a denial of the fact that we do believe in good and bad, and we're just trying to just get rid of the bad by putting this nice little package over it. It seems to me. Yeah. And I want to be clear. I don't want to diminish the value of things like karma and the discussion of illusion, the positive effects of the law of attraction and things like that. I don't want to say that they don't have value, because I do believe that they do have value, absolutely. I just think that they're not the only thing that we need to sort of use as excuses to not dig deeper in our own spiritual presence and our own application of that which we practice. Right. And in fact, you talk about the first step in the spiritual journey being that we need to look at our willingness to have everything that we believe that moves us, to have all of it come up and look at that deeply. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, actually, and that's probably the most important takeaway from my entire tour talks. Every single talk was, when I talk about that our goal is to be the presence of divine love, and that really just means our goal is to know all of who we are, to know it and accept it, and not just individually, but collectively as well. And the first and most important and really only primary step that we have to do is the inquiry of whether we're willing to do it, whether we're willing to be that state. Because when we say, am I really willing to be unconditional about, so let's say that, self-loathing comes up, because this was a common one in the United States. It's fascinating. It doesn't happen so much in France. So let's say that self-loathing comes up. The question, am I willing to be unconditional about this? Or am I going to impose something like, okay, I will allow you here if, fill in the blank, or when, or as long as, or because, or whatever. Those are all conditional kinds of statements. Right. And so am I willing to allow this piece? Am I willing to accept it as an equality, as an equal part of who I am, truly an equal part of who I am? Am I willing to allow it to express all that it is as it is without oppressing it or suppressing it? Am I willing to consider it as a unified part of my being? Am I willing to accept in this present moment what's happening? And so the inquiry of willingness, what happens when we do that is that we begin to find all of the places where we need to say no, where we're really honest about why. No, I don't want to do that. No, I can't do that. No, I don't want to lose this piece. I said earlier, it feels good to be righteous. It does feel good to be righteous. People like to be right. People like to, have these sorts of things. And so we begin to see all the places that would shift in us if we were a presence of divine love. Maybe I wouldn't get to be so judgmental. Maybe I wouldn't get to, do this sort of thing. And then we think, why do I like that? Why does it feel so good? And that causes another question and another question and another question. Oh, why do I not feel like I'm worthy of being a state of divine love? This is another very common when people don't feel worthy of doing this. There's so much self-doubt, self-blame, self-loathing that goes into it. And so then we begin to why do I have these? Where does this come from? What is happening with me? And so we begin to really know ourselves more deeply. And the deeper we go, the more honest that we are, the more loving we can be. We just naturally become with ourselves because we really honestly acknowledge, oh my God, you know what? I am a liar. I really do tell lies. I really do this. And as soon as we put that defense down, it's like, oh man, wow. It's another level of self-acceptance. And this is how it works. As soon as we start doing this, we just start opening these doors a little more and a little more and a little more. And I want to say we're being aided in this, in our inquiry of willingness, so beautifully right now by the young people that are sort of leading our world through social media. I know social media gets a really bad rap, but we have a lot of women, young women, that are YouTube stars that have millions of young people following them. And their message consistently is unconditional acceptance of who I am, and I'm going to put it right out there for everybody to see, without bashing other people, whatever. They promote equality, freedom, unconditional of themselves. And in doing that, they've got millions of young people that they're influencing. It's so phenomenal. It's so, so phenomenal. So the inquiry of willingness is probably the most important thing that we can do in terms of our work towards getting our own state in the state of divine love.
Well, and the self-loathing, I think, carries with it this fear of what we might find if we do that type of inquiry.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you that I can tell you this from rich experience. Some of what we find is so shocking, but I have really never had a time where I didn't want to know what I learned. Mm. When I learn it, I've learned it in such compassionate ways. It's like, again, it feels like this child that we've neglected or rejected. And when it comes up, we just think, why have I not loved this? Why have I not held this? Why have I not seen this? And within ourselves, it's such a magical, oh my God, look at all that I am. Look at all that I have been. Look how we've done this. This is, and I've said this before in my interviews and talks. I'm often asked about the mystery that's on the other side of the veil. Talking about, what's there. But the equally beautiful mystery is what's on this side of the veil. When we begin to really do this introspection and we open up and we honestly allow everything to be known, it's so beautiful. Even if it's painful, we see it in such a beautiful light. It's not a painful process at all. And frankly, I found therapy to be much more painful than this sort of spiritual inquiry. It's a place where we can be very self-compassionate, and we're not used to being self-compassionate. We really fear what we're going to find when, in fact, what we find and the way that we find it is so lovely, really, truly.
And tell me how, if and how prayer fits into that, into opening our willingness up.
I'm a huge fan of prayer. I have a talk called the Wide Awake Prayer that's been a little popular on the internet. And it's prayer is that time where we can have a dialogue. It's really kind of a dialogue with ourselves. But it is really making ourselves sort of talk about and acknowledge the things that are really deep within us. And it is an intentional union with God or with our guides or whatever it is. But what happens when we do prayer is that we're really kind of speaking into the collective place of union. And so nothing that we say with our intention in prayer, nothing that we say just benefits us. It benefits all beings because we're speaking into the field of unity. And so prayers have significant power, and I find them to be one of the best ways that we can really get in touch with our true feelings, our true desires, our true pain, our true anything that's happening in that day. It's often our place where we get into touch with the compassion for the world because we're praying for the world, we're praying for other people, we're doing this sort of moment together on behalf of others or in service to others, and often in service to ourselves. So I would say that prayer, the three parts of my practice consistently are prayer, meditation, and contemplation. And every single day, all three of those are incorporated. I start my day off with them. I end my day with them. And let me just mention one thing you had earlier your question about allowance. There's also a talk called Allowing versus Control. If people are interested in my take on the subject of allowing, there's a talk on the internet on my channel called Allowing versus Control. But every single morning when I wake up, as soon as I'm aware that I'm awake and I start thinking, I stop. And I simply allow. I really just take a breath and I allow what I call my divine family, my union with divine family, to take over my day. From that very moment, I allow from that very moment, the moment I wake up, that the divine is my sort of companion for the day. So I just wanted to make sure that I remember to tell you that.
That's amazing. And actually that brings up, I was looking at the time to see how much time we had left, because you said something earlier about meeting with my soul group. Is this the same divine family that you're referring to now?
No, when I say my divine family now, I mean all of divinity, because I seem that to me just feels like home, and it feels like sort of a united state that I can sort of constantly be in, and a feeling of connection to all beings. But my soul group is, first of all, they're very funny, and I don't know who all of them are. I know that there's several archangels in them, but we all, in my experience, from what I've seen, we all have a soul group, and there is a collective, a small group of beings that are our helpers, if you will. And so they're sort of working. I don't know exactly what all they do, but yeah. So that's how I know my group.
And I assume you mean that these are disembodied beings.
Yeah, they were beings of light. I call them angels because I don't know what else to call them. But they were spectacularly brilliant light. And for me, there were several dozen. I know other people who've met their soul groups who are like, there was 8 of them, or there was 20 of them, or whatever. So I don't know. Everybody's is different, and I don't know I don't know how the system works. I just know that there is a soul group for people.
Also earlier, you talked about getting this sense of your life's purpose, and all the difficulty that you had moving into that until you completely surrendered. But in hearing your story, I wondered if you felt like all of us have this purpose, this thing that we should be doing, this very important thing that we should all be doing.
Well, so I know that I'm unusual in that I talk about this in my book. The second experience that I had under hypnosis, the very first thing that happens is that I find myself suspended way, way up in the universe, looking down and seeing planet Earth and saying that I am the message and I am to be revealed in this world as the message. So I know that this happened before I came here, and I know my reason for coming. And so I know that that's a little unusual, but this is an interesting question to consider, because I don't want to give people something to believe.
Sure.
Right? I don't want people to believe that they have a purpose, or that they have to believe my words about it. But I will tell you that every life has purpose, right? And we can't know. We have no idea who's the teacher and who's the student. So if we've come to this life, are we the teacher for people, or are we the student for people? And of course, in life, it's always the give and take, give and take. But was all of it planned this way? Did we make contracts with people? Every life has a different way of thinking about that and being with that. So I think I don't want to tell people to believe that you have a purpose, or believe that you came here for a reason, or that. Just know that your life absolutely has purpose, because we're all these individuated aspects of God, and everything. So at any given moment in our world, there are 7 billion perspectives on this single moment. And so no one has the same perspective that I have. No one has the same perspective that you have. And so our value that we add is our unique perspective, our unique experiences, our unique choices, our unique engagements. So everybody's purpose is so incredibly, profoundly valuable.
Lovely. Let me see. Wow. I'm having such a good time. You told me I would.
Me too.
Good. Let's see. I had several questions before we started. I don't think I got off script, which is good. Let me see. I apologize.
Good.
Actually, I think we've answered a lot of these questions. Maybe you want to tell us about your experience. You said 90% of your experiences, your metaphysical experiences, went to the divine origin of things, and I think we've touched on that in terms of when really getting at the root of that block that you were experiencing. But how does that translate into your other experiences?
Yeah, so so the experience of going into the body of Jesus at his moment of crucifixion and seeing the world, that was me understanding the world before Christianity, with the birth of Christianity, and then the evolution of Christianity from the vantage point of Christ. And so this is the kind of thing that consistently happens, that I will experience the origin moment from the vantage point of the origin maker. And so, for example, going into the mind of Buddha at his first moment of enlightenment and seeing exactly what he's seeing and understanding things in the way that he's understanding them before any words are ascribed to it, before any teachings come out of it. So it's the moment of the origins, the foundation of Buddhism from the vantage point of Buddha. And going into the God source, into the field of the ultimate field of nothingness, and being one of the initial specks of energy infused with the God force, waking up. So the first moment of conscious awareness and knowing the very first thought that drives evolution was, I am goodness, and I want to be all that I am. And that is our that's the core driving force of awakening. I am goodness. I want to be all that I am. And I don't mean that goodness in a label. You could say I am godness. I am godness, and I want to be all that I am. And that's our driving force of life. So this is what I mean about going into the energies of the origins of fear, the origins of thought, etc., that sort of stuff. So it's all, for some reason, my job is to know the origin experience and have that perspective. So this long-winded metaphysical experience that I told you about is the origin of separation consciousness. I watched us build it, and I watched how we put the conflict nature into it.
That's amazing. Yeah. Wonderful.
Yeah, it's a trip.
Yeah. Well, what a gift. I mean, and what a gift you are to be able to articulate that and share that with the rest of us is just amazing. So.
Thank you. That took a while for me to figure it out, but I had a lot of stumbling and mishaps along the way, but here we are.
Well, you do a fine job.
Thank you very kindly. That's fine.
We do just have a couple minutes left. Is there anything that you would leave us with?
Well, I'll mention that in this last year, in my state of allowing, when I really got to the core of the work of the universe, and I mentioned about, all these things just started happening. Money came forward, and opportunities to speak came forward, and the place where I'm staying came forward. At the same time that happened, a film producer contacted me and asked me if I had considered making my book into a movie. He's a filmmaker. He's actually in Prague right now making his 41st movie. And so he was serious. He said he'd been looking for a spiritual project for many years. He read my book, and he wrote me and said, I'm writing through tears in my eyes. This is what I want to do. And so I said yes. And so we've been working on developing the screenplay. It's now registered, and so hopefully in this coming year we're in the development and packaging stages. So I'm learning all about the movie industry and what happens with that. It's been such a fantastic a creative avenue for me to learn about. I'm not normally in this life now. I'm not in a place of learning sort of the creative things going on. So this has been a lot of fun. So that's something to look forward to, just on a personal level. But I also say that because, all of the sort of magical things that happen in my life really happen in a state of allowance. I know that a lot of people are go-getters and they feel like they need to figure it out and fix life. But I have found so truly that allowing the greatest life that you can live in service to humanity, if that is your calling, or service to yourself, to just lead you rather than you trying to lead it. It really is such a spectacularly magical journey. And there's a lot of fun that comes with it, which is maybe this is the good last note to end in. Spirituality is not supposed to be a heavy business. It's really not. I can assure you, I meet so much joy and playfulness in the divine realms. It's astounding, and I don't really hear a lot of teachers talking about the joy of their experiences. And I really encourage everybody to tap into that with your spirituality. It makes it, first of all, just a lot more fun, but it also opens a lot more doors. Right. And it invites that sort of life to you, and so I really encourage that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you so much for being here with us today. Namaste.
It's my pleasure.
Okay.
All right, Jacqueline. Thank you, and very best wishes to you and your group.
Thank you. Take care.
All righty. Bye bye.